Good evening, everybody. Oh, here we are. We're on our eighth class, only five more. Anyway, okay, so this one is about the wise old man. So tonight we're going to talk about the rise of a new archetype in Jung's experience in the Red Book. Having integrated more and more of the psychic energy stored by his soul through the four stages of his anima, Jung was now ready to encounter the next in a series of archetypes, the wise old man. So the first reading is how Marie-Louise von Franz explained the situation in which he found himself. And I need to share my screen here. Let's see if I can do that correctly. And I'll just turn that off. Okay. So I'm hoping that we'll have some people willing to read along for us. Oh, my sister Lisa is here. Okay, Lisa, let's start with number one.
If an individual has wrestled seriously and long enough with the anima or animus problem, so that he or she is no longer partially identified with it, the unconscious again changes its dominant character and appears in a new symbolic form representing the self, the innermost nucleus of the personality. In the dreams of a woman, this center is usually personified as a superior female figure, a priestess, sorceress, earth mother, or goddess of nature or love. In the case of a man, it manifests itself as a masculine initiator and guardian, an Indian guru, a wise old man, a spirit of nature, and so forth.
Okay, thank you. So notice in this passage that the self appears as a masculine figure in a man and a feminine figure for a woman, thus reversing the gender of their anima-animus archetype. Jung describes the masculine initiator as a figure of the same sex corresponding to the idealized father image that the person carries. This is a personality saturated with what's called mana, M-A-N-A, which is a supernatural force that permeates the universe according to Melanesian and Polynesian cultures. They believe that the power of the elementary forces of nature can be embodied in an object or a person. In Jung's words, the wise old man is a dominant figure of the collective unconscious, the recognized archetype of the mighty man in the form of hero, chief, magician, medicine man, saint, the ruler of men and spirits. Similarly, the wise old woman is represented by the Greek goddess Hecate or the crone, and also the Great Mother. It represents an aspect of the idealized mother image. These two archetypes of the collective unconscious can thus be seen as inner representations of the same-sex pairing, as an image built up from parental influences, plus the specific reactions of the child. Consequently, for the Jungian, the process of bringing to consciousness the archetype of the mana personality signifies for the man the second and true liberation from the father, and for the woman that from the mother. In doing so, people achieve their first perception of their own unique individuality. So let's get specific about the Red Book, shall we? Number 2, I think, is going to be Elizabeth. And maybe 3 afterwards, Elizabeth. So you're muted, unfortunately.
Not now.
Great.
I'm sorry about that. Soon after this fantasy, the Mysterium visions of Elijah and Salome. Another figure rose out of the unconscious. He developed out of the Elijah figure. I called him Philemon. Philemon was a pagan and brought with him an Egypto-Hellenistic atmosphere with a Gnostic coloration. This figure first appeared to me in the following dream.
Okay, hang on a minute. So we're going to examine Jung's dream in a few minutes, but before we do, it would be helpful to know something of Philemon's historical background. Philemon and his wife Baucis are characters from Greek mythology, only known to us from Ovid's Metamorphoses. Philemon and Baucis were an old married couple in the region of Tyana, which Ovid places in Phrygia in central Turkey. They were the only ones in their town to welcome the two disguised gods, Zeus and Hermes, who later became Jupiter and Mercury in Roman mythology. Their courteous response to these masquerading gods came to symbolize the pious exercise of hospitality, the ritualized guest friendship called xenia or theoxenia when a god was involved. So here is a map of Turkey. What we need to do is look at this little place here, Tuwana. That is the more recent name of Tyana. So that gives you a sense of where this all occurred. So here's the story. Ovid, who is alive from 43 BCE to 17 in the Common Era, tells the tale of Philemon and Baucis. So Jupiter and Mercury, the Roman names for Zeus and Hermes, wandered the hill country of Phrygia disguised as mortals. They searched for somewhere to rest, but were barred from 1,000 homes. An old couple finally took them in. This particular couple had been married in their cottage in their youth, grew old together, and contentedly accepted their poverty. Well, here's what people think Ovid looked like. Philemon and Baucis prepared a meal for their guests. During the meal, the couple saw that the flask of wine automatically refilled itself as soon as it was emptied. This tipped them off to the fact that the two were actually gods. In honor of their guests, the couple offered to kill their soul goose. The goose took refuge with the visiting gods, who said that it should not be killed. Jupiter and Mercury then revealed themselves and told the couple that their neighborhood would be punished, but that they would be spared. They asked the couple to climb the nearby mountain with them. When they reached the top, Philemon and Baucis saw that the country surrounding their cottage had been flooded, leaving only their cottage untouched. It had been transformed into a temple with marble columns and a gold roof. The gods then asked the couple what they would like. Philemon replied that they wished to be their priests and serve in their shrine. He also asked that when the time came for them to die, they would both go together. Their wishes were granted, and when they died, they were transformed into an oak and a linden tree standing side by side in the deserted, boggy terrain. So here is a famous painting by Jacob von Oost, who lived from 1603 to 1671. He was considered to be the most important painter in Bruges, Belgium during the 17th century. So here you have Philemon and then his wife and the goose trying to flee, and then the two gods up here. One of Carl Jung's favorite books was Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust. This is a drawing of what he looked like. He was the German writer, poet, playwright, and philosopher who is widely regarded as one of the greatest figures in Western literature. He lived from 1749 to 1832. Jung first read Faust at the suggestion of his mother when he was a teenager. At the time, he was struggling with the existence of evil in the world. Until he read Goethe's famous story, he had been unable to find a major thinker who takes the devil seriously, who confronts the adversary who has the power to frustrate God's plan to make a perfect world. Okay, Elizabeth, let's go back here and read number 3 then.
With Faust, at last I found confirmation that there were or had been people who saw evil and its universal power and, more important, the mysterious role it played in delivering man from darkness and suffering. To that extent, Goethe became, in my eyes, a prophet.
Okay. So Goethe's Faust made a tremendous impression on Jung and held a lifelong significance with him. But that is not to say that he had no reservations about the book. Okay, Ingrid, let's continue on with that passage from Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, number 4.
I could not forgive him, Goethe, for having dismissed Mephistopheles, the devil, by a mere trick, by a bit of jiggery-pokery. For me, this was too theological, too frivolous and irresponsible. And I was deeply sorry that Goethe too had fallen for those cunning devices by which evil is rendered innocuous.
So if you can hang on, I'll ask you to read 5 in a minute too. So even more troubling to Jung was the way Goethe treated Philemon and Baucis near the end of his play. In Act 5 of Goethe's Faust Part 2, a wanderer who had previously been saved by them calls upon Philemon and Baucis. At this point in the overarching story, Faust is now a very old man, as in the process of building a city on land reclaimed from the sea. Faust proceeds to tell Mephistopheles that he wants Philemon and Baucis moved. So Mephistopheles and 3 powerful men immediately go and burn the cottage, with Philemon and Baucis still inside. When he learns of their terrible fate, Faust replies that he had only intended to exchange their dwelling for another. Jung felt personally implicated by the destruction of these humble and reverent figures, and felt that it was his responsibility to atone for this crime and to prevent its repetition. Healing this Faustian sin would become a central theme in his life work. Okay, Ingrid, this is now time for number 5.
On January 5th, 1942, Jung wrote to Paul Schmidt, I have taken over Faust as my heritage, and moreover as the advocate of Philemon and Baucis, who, unlike Faust the Superman, are the hosts of the gods in a ruthless and God-forsaken age.
Thank you. In the epilogue of his book, Psychology and Alchemy, Jung dealt with Faust's act of hubris. In his blind rage for superhuman power, Faust brought about the murder of Philemon and Baucis, he says. His analysis of Faust's character led Jung to a general conclusion about people, which is more timely today than it was when he wrote it. Okay, so Jennifer, this is number 6, and I may ask you to do 7 as well in a few minutes.
An inflated consciousness is always egocentric and conscious of nothing but its own existence. It is incapable of learning from the past, incapable of understanding contemporary events, and incapable of drawing right conclusions about the future. It is hypnotized by itself and therefore cannot be argued with. It inevitably dooms itself to calamities that must strike it dead.
Okay. Jung maintained that ever since the Age of Enlightenment, and especially in the era of scientific rationalism, the psyche had become synonymous with consciousness. The unconscious was strictly excluded. As he put it, there was no psyche outside the ego. Therefore, he believed that mankind's current task is to repudiate the, quote, arrogant claim of the conscious mind to be the whole of the psyche, and to admit that the psyche is a reality which we cannot grasp with our present means of understanding. The problem of modern man, as Jung saw it, is his God Almightiness, which is the identification of the ego with the objective psyche or the divine. To put it another way, the sin of modern man is his inflation. As the Red Book strongly suggests, as long as we are unwilling to return to poverty for the sake of God, and as long as we are unwilling to accept the burden of our spiritual poverty, then despite all our material wealth, there will remain a lack of inner happiness. Surely this realization of spiritual poverty is the reason why Baha'u'llah revealed the shortest of 3 obligatory prayers, which individual Baha'is may choose to recite each day. Okay, Jennifer, that's something you can recite.
I testify at this moment to my powerlessness and to thy might, to my poverty and to thy wealth.
Okay. Jung understood that inflation is actually a regression of consciousness into unconsciousness. This had huge real-world implications for him. And Milton's going to read this one for us, number 8. I'm going to just scroll up a bit. There you go.
This always happens when consciousness takes too many unconscious contents upon itself and loses the faculty of discrimination, the sine qua non of all consciousness. When fate for 4 whole years played out a war of monumental frightfulness on the stage of Europe, the Great War, also known as World War I, a war that nobody wanted. Nobody dreamed of asking exactly who or what had caused the war and its continuation. Nobody realized that European man was possessed by something that robbed him of all free will. And this state of unconscious possession will continue undeterred until we Europeans become scared of our God Almightiness. Let's see, Carl Jung.
Yes, it is. Thank you so much. I think there are certain actors out there right now who need to be scared about their own God Almightiness.
So many.
Sine qua non is a Latin term meaning without which not. More or less, this means without something, something else won't be possible. The change Jung is calling for can only begin with individuals. For the masses are blind brutes, as we know to our cost. Only individuals may begin to understand that there are contents which do not belong to the ego personality, but must be ascribed to a psychic non-ego. This is the lesson Philemon taught him about the objective existence of the figures he interacted with in the imaginal realm. All right, Heather, here we are, number 9, and then I'll ask you to do 10 in a second, too. You're muted.
Very few people care to know anything about this. It is so much easier to preach the universal panacea to everyone else than to take it oneself. And as we all know, things are never so bad when everybody is in the same boat. No doubts can exist in the herd. The bigger the crowd, the better the truth, and the greater the catastrophe.
But you have to remember that he lived through both world wars, right in the center of Europe. So he knew what he was talking about. So now we get back to, oh, sorry.
Oh, you're talking now. Okay,
Yeah,
I'll stop.
yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So now to Jung's dream of Philemon in 1914. Here is how he described it 4 decades later in Memories, Dreams, and Reflections. Okay, Heather, that's number 10.
Okay. There was a blue sky like the sea, covered not by clouds, but by flat brown clods of earth. It looked as if the clods were breaking apart and the blue water of the sea were becoming visible between them. But the water was the blue sky. Suddenly there appeared from the right a winged being sailing across the sky. It was an old man with horns of a bull. He held a bunch of 4 keys, one of which he clutched as if he were about to open a lock. He had the wings of the kingfisher with its characteristic colors. Since I did not understand this dream image, I painted it in order to impress it upon my memory.
While Jung was painting this portrait of Philemon in 1924, a peculiar incident occurred in his real life. All right, number 11 is Alan's.
During the days when I was occupied with the painting, I found in my garden by the lakeshore a dead kingfisher. I was thunderstruck, for kingfishers are quite rare in the vicinity of Zurich, and I have never since found a dead one. The body was recently dead, at most 2 or 3 days, and showed no external injuries.
Okay, thank you. So this may well have been one of those strange events that led Jung to posit the existence of what he called synchronicity. This is a concept Jung coined in the late 1920s to describe events that coincide in time and appear meaningfully related, yet lack a discoverable causal connection. It is the quality or fact of being synchronous of events happening at the same time. It refers to the coincidental occurrence of events, especially psychic events, such as similar thoughts in widely separated persons, or a mental image of an unexpected event before it happens, that seem related but are not explained by conventional mechanisms of causality. Jung believed that this is a healthy function of the mind, although it can become harmful within psychosis. When he returned to the imaginal realm, Jung sought out the figure he had seen in his dream. Believing that Philemon holds the secret of magic, Jung makes a concerted effort to get him to explain its nature and workings. But Philemon is quite coy in response, stating that there's nothing to tell. Despite his reticence, we manage to learn that magic is conducted with sympathy, by which Philemon means both compassion and sympathetic or imitative methods. We also learn that for Philemon, magic is inborn in man, an idea that Jung reinforces with his observation that all peoples in all times have the same magical customs. This touches on a line of thinking that will enhance his developing notion of the collective unconscious. So I'm hoping Alan is willing to do this in a second. Here is Jung's description of the magician in the final chapter of the second book in the Red Book. That's number 12. Let me just pull that up for you.
After a long search, I found the small house in the country, fronted by a large bed of tulips. This is where Philemon, the magician, lives with his wife, Faust. Philemon is one of those magicians who has not yet managed to banish old age, but who lives it with dignity, and his wife can only do the same. Their interests seem to have become narrow, even childish. They water their bed of tulips and tell each other about the flowers that have newly appeared. And their days fade into a pale, wavering chiaroscuro, excuse me.
Yeah, that's a tough word.
Unless you're Italian. Lit up by the past, only slightly frightened of darkness and what is to come.
Okay, in art, the term I can't even say it properly. Chiaroscuro. Okay, there's my wife who knows art. Okay. This term refers to the use of strong contrast between light and dark. It also describes the use of contrasting light to achieve a sense of volume in modeling three-dimensional objects and figures. There are similar effects in cinema, in low-key and black and white photography. In their first encounter, Philemon appears aged, feeble, and unlikely to provide any real assistance. Okay, Hangame, I'm going to see if you can do 13 and 14, but with a break.
Thank you. Why is Philemon a magician? Does he conjure up immortality for himself, a life beyond? He was probably only a magician by profession, and he now appears to be a pensioned magician who has retired from service. His desirousness and creative drive have expired, and he now enjoys his well-earned rest out of sheer incapacity, like every old man who can do nothing else than plant tulips and water his little garden.
Oh, that hurts. So Jung is clearly unimpressed. At this point, Philemon appears to be a mysterious old magician, a strange dream figure with the blue wings of a kingfisher holding a key. However, the most significant inner figure in the Red Book is himself gradually transformed, as he changes from a cryptic and reserved old man to an active guide and eloquent teacher. In Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung hints at the nature of his coming relationship with Philemon. And that's number 14.
Psychologically, Philemon represented superior insight. He was a mysterious figure to me. At times, he seemed to me quite real, as if he were a living personality. I went walking up and down the garden with him, and to me, he was what the Indians call a guru.
Okay. So in private comments that he made to one of his assistants, Carrie D'Angelo, in 1923, Jung describes Philemon as something ineffably greater. In her detailed notes of January 26, 1924, D'Angelo recounts her memory of their conversation, during which Jung told her he was going to share the contents of the Red Book with her, asking her to make a new transcription of it, since he had added a great deal of material since an earlier version had been typed out. Philemon was, in multiform manifestations, an avatar of the master, as he said. Okay, Milton, this is a lengthy one, but excellent one. Number 15.
In the Red Book, D'Angelo says, there were various figures speaking, Elias, that is Elijah, Father Philemon, etc. All appeared to be phases of what you thought ought to be called the Master. You were sure that this latter was the same who inspired Buddha, Mani, Christ, Muhammad, all those who may be said to have communed with God. But the others had identified with him. You absolutely refused to. It could not be for you, you said. You had to remain the psychologist, the person who understood the process. I said then that the thing to be done was to enable the world to understand the process also, without getting the notion that they had the master caged as if it were at their beck and call. They had to think of him as a pillar of fire, perpetually moving on and forever out of human grasp. Yes, you said it was something like that. Perhaps it cannot be done. As you talked, I grew more and more aware of the immeasurability of the ideas which are filling you. You said that they had the shadow of eternity upon them, and I could feel the truth of it. Carrie Bain's papers quoted in a reader's edition.
Yeah, she changed her last name 3 times through marriage, so. In the final vision recorded in Scrutinies, the third part of the Red Book, Jung meets both Philemon and Christ in a garden. Philemon addresses Christ as my master, my beloved, my brother. Christ sees Philemon, but recognizes him as Simon Magus, one of the first historical figures of ancient Gnosticism, Philemon explains to Christ that he was once Simon Magus, but has now become Philemon. In the Black Books, we learn that Simon Magus hides in Philemon. Simon Magus is described in the New Testament in Acts 8 as a convert to Christianity and a magician who hoped to purchase the power to transmit the Holy Spirit. Jung apparently saw this story as a caricature. Further accounts of him are found in the apocryphal Acts of Peter and in the writings of the Church Fathers. He was later thought to be one of the founders of Gnosticism. In the 2nd century, there arose a Gnostic sect which developed a complex theosophy and worshiped Simon as God the Father. Sonu Shamdasani points out that Simon Magus was said to be accompanied by a woman who Magus believed to be a reincarnation of Helen of Troy. Jung cited her as an example of the anima figure, as we saw last time. According to Sanford Drob, there is little doubt that Jung identified with Simon. In the main 1917 entry of Black Book 6, Jung tells us that Philemon is to be identified with both Elijah and Khidr, who we heard plenty about last in the first part of this course. So we've already met both these figures, Elijah in classes 5 and 6 of part 2 of our course on the imaginal realm, and Khidr, the mysterious figure from Islamic mysticism, who we studied in class 6 of the imaginal realm in part 1 of this course. Not only does Jung believe that Philemon is the same figure as Elijah and Khidr, he also goes on to say that Philemon is not a man. He is truly the self, the capital S self. In 1939, Jung delivered a lecture at the Uranus conference called Concerning Rebirth. You can find it in the Archetypes and the Collective Unconscious, which is Collected Works, Volume 9-1. Here is his assessment of Khidr based on his meeting with Moses in Surah 18 of the Quran. Now, this will be familiar to us all, but with his own take on it. Okay, so we need a couple or 3 more readers at least. How many have we got here altogether? Oh, I went overboard, 21 altogether. So we're on 16 right now. Any takers? Oh, Lisa's here. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Khidr may well be a symbol of the self. His qualities signalize him as such. He is said to have been born in a cave, i.e., in darkness. He is the long-lived one who continually renews himself like Elijah. Moses accepts him as a higher consciousness and looks up to him for instruction. Then follow those incomprehensible deeds, which shows how ego consciousness reacts to the superior guidance of the self through the twists and turns of fate. To the initiate, who is capable of transformation, it is a comforting tale. To the obedient believer, an exhortation not to murmur against Allah's incomprehensible omnipotence. Khidr symbolizes not only the higher wisdom, but also a way of acting, which is in accord with this wisdom and transcends reason.
I find that quite a perceptive characterization of Khidr. Given his identification of Khidr and Philemon, presumably this analysis also applies to Philemon. Let's continue with Jung's depiction of Philemon in the Red Book. We're switching over to a direct quote from the book itself. Okay, Alan, back for more, eh? Okay, number 17.
I had to check the vocabulary to make sure I could read it. But what mystery are you intimating to me with your name, O Philemon? Truly, you are the lover who once took in the gods as they wandered the earth when everyone else refused them lodging. You are the one who unsuspectingly gave hospitality to the gods. They thanked you by transforming your house into a golden temple, while the flood swallowed everyone else. You remained alive when chaos erupted. You it was who served in the sanctuary when the peoples called out in vain to the gods. Truly, it is the lover who survives.
Nicely done. Jung then goes on to explain that there are actually three types of lovers. Those who love men, those who love the souls of men, and those who love their own soul. In his opinion, Philemon exemplifies the third type of lover. And indeed, Jung questions whether one is actually a man until one is a lover of one's own soul. And that's essentially what he's trying to learn how to do throughout the whole Red Book, is to love his own soul. In his 1916 commentary in the Red Book concerning their first encounter, Jung wrote a long ode to Philemon in which he expresses his understanding of him as it developed through later experiences. Now, I think it's Elizabeth first here, number 18. You're muted, unfortunately.
Your way, O Philemon, is instructive. You leave me in a salutary, i.e., beneficial darkness, where there is nothing for me either to see or look for. You are no light that shines in the darkness, no savior who establishes an eternal truth, thus extinguishes the nocturnal light of human understanding. You leave room for the stupidity and jokes of others. You do not want, O blessed one, anything from the other, but instead you tend the flowers in your own garden. Christ has made men desirous forever, since they expect gifts from their saviors, without any service in return. Giving is as childish as power. He who gives presumes himself powerful. The virtue of giving is the sky-blue mantle of the tyrant. You are wise, O Philemon. You do not give. You want your garden to bloom, and for everything to grow from within itself.
Oh. That's quite radically different, isn't it, than the way we tend to see these subjects. Contrast, you are no light that shines in the darkness, with John chapter 1, verse 5, where Christ is described as follows, and the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehendeth it not. An alternative translation reads, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it. So now this is a straight continuation from that last passage, and that's number 19, and then followed directly by 20. So Linda, are you up for reading 19 and maybe 20?
Okay. I praise, O Philemon, your lack of acting like a savior. You are no shepherd who runs after stray sheep, since you believe in the dignity of man, who is not necessarily a sheep. But if he happens to be a sheep, you would leave him the rights and dignity of sheep, since why should sheep be made into men? There are still more than enough men. You know, O Philemon, the wisdom of things to come. Therefore you are old, oh so very ancient. And just as you tower above me in years, so you tower above the present in futurity, and the length of your past is immeasurable. You are legendary and unreachable. You were and will be returning periodically. Your wisdom is invisible, your truth is unknowable, entirely untrue in any given age, and yet true in eternity. But you pour out living water from which the flowers of your garden bloom, a starry water, a dew of the night.
Well, let's just continue and finish that one, number 20.
What do you need, O Philemon? You need men for the sake of small things, since everything greater and the greatest thing is in you. Christ spoiled men, since he taught them that they can be saved only by one, namely him, the Son of God. And ever since, men have been demanding the greater things from others, especially their salvation. And if a sheep gets lost somewhere, it accuses the shepherd. O Philemon, you are a man, and you prove that men are not sheep, since you look after the greatest in yourself, and hence fructifying waters flow into your garden from inexhaustible jugs.
Those three passages are, I think, very profound and could be meditated on profitably for quite a while. And how does that relate to the Baha'i concept of the manifestation of God? But we're not going to do that right now. So, as I said, Jung painted a portrait of Philemon during 1924 and placed it in his Red Book. Above the picture, he inscribed in Greek an appellation, Father of the Prophets, beloved Philemon. There it is, a kingfisher. On the facing page, he painted an image of a veiled woman standing on an altar within a sanctuary. This is the way he envisioned Sophia, or wisdom, who we saw last time in the fourth and highest stage of the anima in the Red Book. These two facing portraits on pages 154 and 5 of the facsimile version of the Red Book depict the two principal companions Jung met during his visionary journey. They form a thematic conclusion to Jung's transcription of the Liber Novus into his red leather folio volume. Over the next 6 years, only 15 or so further pages would be transcribed into the master copy of the Red Book. Jung clearly had a significant relationship with Philemon. No less complex was his relationship with the changeable feminine power he met in the various forms of the soul. In 1924, he named her Sapienta, which is Sophia, the wisdom of God in a mystery. Both figures integrated themselves within Jung's perception of a Gnostic heritage. The portrait of Sophia shows her in a church, taking the place of the altar, with her face veiled. Above her, he inscribed the Latin phrase meaning, the wisdom of God in mystery. In his 1951 article, The Psychological Aspects of the Chore, Jung declared that the image restores the anima to the Christian church, not as an icon, but as the altar itself. The altar is the place of sacrifice and also the receptacle for consecrated relics. Jung placed carefully chosen quotations around the veiled figure, up and down the sides. Maybe if I reduce the size, you can see there's also a big line along the bottom. Sano Shamdasani provides us with complete translations in the next two readings. And Heather, I'm going to ask you to read both of them. So let's switch back over here. 21. You're muted, Heather.
Sorry. On the left-hand side of the image of Sophia, there is the Arabic word for daughters. On the border of the image is the following inscription, Latin text. This is a citation from 1 Corinthians 2, verse 2, Corinthians 2, verses 7 to 10. The portions cited by Jung are marked in italics, but we speak.
Sorry, Heather, I had problems with transferring this information into this document. The italics didn't show up, so I'll just highlight them with my pen here. Okay, so this is okay. That's one part, and then when you finish that, I'll read and go for the rest.
But we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom, which God ordained before the world into our glory, which none of the princes of the world knew.
Yep, go ahead.
For had they known it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But as it is written, eye hath not seen, nor ear heard, neither have entered into the heart of man the things which God hath prepared for them that love him. But God hath revealed them unto us by his Spirit. For the Spirit searcheth all things, yea, the deep things of God.
Okay, sorry for that little wrinkle. But anyway, go ahead now with 21.
Okay, on either side of the arch is an inscription from the Revelation of John, verse 22:17. The Spirit and the bride say, Come, and let him that heareth say, Come, and let him that is athirst come, and whosoever will, let him take the water of life freely. Above the arch is the inscription Ave Virgo Virginium, Hail Virgin of Virgins. This is the title of a medieval hymn.
Okay, thank you. Around the time that Jung finished these two images, which is generally thought to be in 1923, he had already begun construction of his tower at Bollingen. Above the tower, the door of the tower, he carved a dedication, again in Latin, consecrating the place as the shrine of Philemon. Here is a not very good picture of the tower from the water. On a bedroom wall upstairs in the tower, in a large mural format, he again painted an image of Philemon. Above that painting, he added the title, Philemon, the prophet's primal father. Okay, so that, my friends, is the end of the presentation this evening. I've given you a great deal to chew over. How would you like to respond to that?
I think it's really interesting that he built a tower. He put this right into his own house. It's not enough to write about it, but to actually memorialize it.
Mm-hmm. Well, in fact, he built that it's a separate property from his house altogether. It's down the lake, quite some distance. And so he built every square inch of that building himself over the years. He felt that one of the things that he had to do with the Red Book in order for him to understand it and for other people to start to grapple with it in a realistic way was to make it concrete. And so that's why he went to the incredible work of creating the Red Book with the calligraphy and the art that he did. But even that wasn't enough. He had to build a building that would represent it in a truthful way for himself. It's a long story, but that's just the gist of it. So he obviously felt this whole thing was important, not just to himself, but to other people. And we've only just begun our little examination of his work. Jack, you've got a thought or two.
Yeah, a thought or two, a comment, and then a couple of comments. So, Mark, if I'm understanding this correctly, I think I do. The archetype of Philemon there's a kind of religious figure, the unconscious revealing its own wisdom to the conscious mind. Is that it?
Yeah, between Philemon and Sophia.
Between Philemon and Sophia. Yeah, okay. Very good. And the image, it's interesting that Blake did the same thing when he portrayed God. They always portray God as an old man with a beard, and in German they call God der Alte, the old guy or the old one, And it's interesting that they do that because although Baha'u'llah talks about this youth, right, also, which is a completely different image with different attributes. So, the old guy has wisdom, the youth has beauty and vigor and so on and so forth. So these things represent different spiritual attributes. But
Yes.
oh, now the thought's gone out of mind. Just like an old guy myself, eh? The thought. But anyway, yeah, no, I've lost it. It'll come back to me. I got lost in my own digression there. But oh yes, here it's come back already. You mentioned, Mark, all of these very contrary notions that we read in readings 19 and 20, which seem to be the very opposite of what we are taught to believe and behave like, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, what's the reason for that? Now, I was thinking that, is this an attempt to come to grips with negation, because the readings, in a sense, were a bit shocking because they contradict, as you pointed out, what we traditionally believe. So what's going on here with this sacrilege, so to speak, where the sacred is denied? Is it that the soul is trying to come to grips with the wisdom of evil? I don't fully understand this. What's going on here psychologically, do you think?
Well, I'm not sure that he's really critiquing the sacred.
No.
I think what he's doing is expanding it way beyond the normal barriers or boundaries that we have set aside for it, because we have excluded so much. And so that's one of his main points about Christianity, that it had diminished the role of women so much. And it wasn't until the 20th century that the Virgin Mary was given some kind of divine status. That was a very long time for women to be pushed aside. And also the other thing that he is not happy about is that Christianity has denied the physical self. And you can see that in all the priests who decide that they're never going to touch a woman in their entire lives. Right? So those two things are big issues for Jung. And he saw the effects that it had on the many patients he had over the century. Well, not the whole century, but 50 years. Well, that's where he's coming from. So he thinks that we have a limited sense of God, and it's time to blow off the doors. Let's see something beyond what we've been taught to see. How do we include? Wilbur calls it transcending and including. That's what he's trying to do with these so-called sacrilegious ideas.
So, Mark, how would you explain then what's the Jungian wisdom about? Is there any virtue in evil? I think you've been trying to indicate that there is in some sense. What is it?
Well, I just finished reading his famous book, Answer to Job, which is a blistering attack on the Old Testament God for allowing Satan to come in and get authorization to tamper with Job's life. almost to the point of killing him.
Yeah, testing him.
Yep. And so he really goes hammer and tongs at that book. It's a fascinating read, but it's a little disturbing if you don't want to touch the idea of God that the Old Testament presents. So, Lynette, I saw that you were asked something or say something.
I wonder if this might be helpful. You know, the huge inflation that they were discussing of how things are so blown out of proportion, and Philemon keeps saying, come right down into the body, come down into the earth, into the soil, and to level out that feeling that God is somehow way out of touch and so pure that we can't even find ourselves in it.
Mm-hmm.
I have a great I have a great love for the Philemon figure as well, and because I and by the way, I do have a copy of the Red Book. I could hold it up if I could hold it up. It weighs about 30 pounds.
Yeah.
But it has these amazing paintings, and the one that you showed of Philemon is just an amazing painting, which I have here, and he was, really the idea, I'm just going to water my flowers, right? Let's come right down into ourselves and remember the sacredness, one of the earth. And then when he brings in the anima, when he brings in Sophia, trying to bring that into the feminine and the sense of the holiness of our whole being. Not just a kind of ethereal or spiritualized form.
Yeah, exactly right.
Very tough. It was very tough what he was struggling with.
I think we've made maybe a little bit of progress in that direction, but
I think getting a little.
Not that much.
The other
Sure.
thing I say is going way back to some of the earlier readings today. It sounded so familiar to today. The of the massive power inflation of nations right now.
Yeah.
It's so relevant, that material.
Yeah. I had to include it for that very reason.
Thank you.
It really speaks to the times.
Yeah.
Okay, Alan.
Yeah, I have sort of a half-baked idea, and I'd like to share it though. I was listening to a program that was talking about the universe and its creation. And I was also looking at another program, and it was talking about there seems to be a genetic flow from one generation to the next. That we don't really understand, but the habits that are observed in one generation somehow get transferred off to offspring, which have had nothing to do with the parents who originally had the insight or the inspiration. They talked about certain life forms on the Galapagos and how they must have evolved, and they can't figure out how the same behaviors appeared on different islands with the same species over time when there was obviously no concept or a way for the species to communicate with each other. It was like there's an underground force or power that transmits from one understanding to another. You talked about this synchronicity events, and it sort of reminded me of that. And then when you take this into the universal level, if you will, we're talking about maybe up to conservatively there are about 300,000 galaxies in our universe. That's a very large number, but if you realize that in each of those galaxies there can be maybe an average of 3 billion stars. And around those 3 billion stars in those 300,000 galaxies, there's an average of 4 planets. So you get an idea that there could be well over 3 or 4 trillion planets in our universe. And God's been around for a few years. And I was wondering if, speculating really, is if there is a flow, much like there is genetically, of some sort of synchronous event, synchronous understanding between all of these planets or life on these planets. So that what has been learned in a different galaxy, far, far away, might be drifting through the universe and becoming part of what our understanding is. Now,
Wow.
just speculative, but
Oh,
totally.
talk about spacey. Holy cow. But interesting that you're drawing our attention to that. Because, I mean, Jung is talking about tapping into the collective unconscious. And who's to say that that's limited to planet Earth? Who knows? I mean, we know so little about it at this point that, we can't exactly say, well, it only goes this far.
Just to sort of add one more little point to this, God's had a lot of experience with planets and people, perhaps, or life forms. He probably knows what he's doing.
Oh. So are you saying we should just trust the process?
I think we all have each of us has our own opportunities to advance the process for all of the universe by becoming what God has asked us to become.
Which brings us back to the subject of the true individual, right? Which is what the process of individuation is intended to maximize. Anyway, just a thought. Okay, Jack, are you going to respond to the math?
No, I'm not. I just wanted to thank you and Lynette for pointing out. I didn't realize this about Jungian psychology really until today, that he was trying to restore the sacredness of the body, of the instincts. He also had, one of his archetypes was the great mother goddess. And the archetypes occur, I mean, the mind is in, after all, is in the body. So all of these things take place in the body. And of course, gardening is very connected with the soil and therefore the soul in a way. So Lynette, I want to thank you and you, Mark, also for pointing that out. I didn't realize that was part of Jungian psychology. And Christianity has been into the denial of the body for so long. And seeing it as a source of evil, and particularly, Adam and Eve. Eve was the temptress and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, and it's hard to put all of these things into balance, isn't it? To what but yeah, the wholeness of life, and there's been such a strong ascetic life-denying element in religion. And I think Jung was trying to overcome that by, as a matter of fact, David Erickson may remember about the mother goddess. I was with him and Jacoba Philippe many years ago when I actually had a mystical experience right there and then. And I told David and Jacoba about it, that I saw the mother goddess archetype. I somehow penetrated that archetype and I saw her as a great huge, big-breasted, smiling mother. And later, when I looked at some of these goddess figures of in ancient mythology, that's exactly how they depicted her, the great mother goddess. And so I actually that day, I don't know how it happened, but I actually visualized when I was awake, I was conscious, and I told David and Jacob about it at the time. I'm having this experience and I've got to tell you about it. And then later I realized when I looked at some of these images of mother goddess figures in antiquity, that's what I'd seen. So I've actually seen graphically that archetype with my own eyes.
So I see that Meryl wants to speak, but I'm going to pass it over to David and Belinda because you had just mentioned them. So
Yeah.
go ahead, David.
Uh,
Or did you want to say anything at this point?
Do you want to comment on what Jack just said?
well, as I recall it, that day, Jack was stretched out on the ground and face down, and that's where he was having his vision, and I mean, you can, you might say that he had a vision of what we might call the Earth Mother.
Mhm.
The Earth Mother. And,
That's right, David. I was stretched out on the ground, so I was literally close to the earth, right?
yeah, that's right. You were. And so, but you see, the Earth itself, the planet itself, is a very mysterious thing because we're not aware of all that's in it or underneath it. You're saying. So, so there is, to a certain extent, a darkness, or you might say, there's a mysterious thing here. How did I put it? It's very interesting. You could call, for example, I don't know where this ties in with it, but you could call the sun as a symbol, as the father.
Mm-hmm. I do.
Or the creator, or whatever, just as a symbol. And the earth is the receptor of the light. So it's feminine. And because all the powers of life are in the earth, the myriads of life, all the forms of life, all come from the earth. And the sun, without the sun, of course, you couldn't have anything. It's the light. Okay. But the light, you might say, from this point of view, it impregnates the earth, the planet. And from it comes all this light, all this life, you see. So, and I think that this really is an image that is very important. For example, in the Chinese Book of Changes, the I Ching, the first two hexagrams, the first hexagram is called the creative or heaven. And the second hexagram is called the receptive. And so you might say you have two hexagrams. The first two hexagrams, out of those hexagrams comes all the others, 64 hexagrams. And that's an image, not just like that. The first two hexagrams, you have to know how the I Ching was put together, and all it has 6 lines, the creative, and they're all.
David, can I stop you there? I don't think we want to go into the I Ching in any detail right now. I know it's related to Jack's experience, but I don't want to go any further down that particular road. I would like to hear from 2 or 3 other people. Meryl has already indicated that she has something she'd like to say, and then Milton is next. Our time is short, so.
Could I just thank David for his comment, though? I found it very helpful. Thank you, David.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I just had a question, but I had a tiny comment after David spoke, which is that in the Braiding Sweetgrass book, there's a beautiful story about Sky Woman. I won't say any more, but it's a beautiful story from the Indigenous people.
Okay.
So anyway, the question related to, I think that in a previous one of these classes, there was a mention about Jung's interpretation of what the snake was, and it was different. And I wasn't clear on what that was, and I was wondering if you could either just tell me what it was or where I could find that out. Read it.
Well, I think the point that he was making, I mean, he's making many points about the snake, but one of the main ones is that it is from the earth. So it acts as a conduit, if you like, between the earth and conscious human beings. So it's the route that unconscious material can come through to a person.
Okay, so, and that's a good thing, I'm assuming.
Well, in Jung's book, it certainly was.
Right. So where can I learn more about that? Because I was really intrigued by that. I wanted to find out where that whole idea, where did Jung get that, or...
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have to do a little research, and I'll send you something tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah, because I've always wondered if this snake got misinterpreted somehow. I think a lot of Christianity stuff got misinterpreted.
Well, take a look at the impact that that particular snake had in the evolution of the human consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Right? The way it was understood.
That's right. So it wasn't all bad. In fact, I think it was the catalyst, if you like, for our growth. It did a very important job by connecting human beings with that sense of good and evil.
Yeah, anyway, I don't want to take your time because I know other people have questions.
Okay, well, Milton, then what are you thinking about?
Oh, a couple things. The first one was, regarding the earth itself. I remember Baha'u'llah said there are astonishing things in the earth. So that's something to always keep in mind. But the other bit here was I was really struck. Somebody mentioned that Jung really focuses on the fact that life itself is not an ethereal thing. Here we are. We're on this planet. We have our physical existence, and it occurs to me that life might not be something that's emergent from the universe, but it might be co-emergent with the universe. In other words, life and the universe are kind of, in a way, the same thing, because I can't square the idea without thinking of it this way. I can't quite square what Abdu'l-Baha said about the countless stars and with countless planets, and on every planet has its creatures. And so I'm thinking maybe there's life and the universe are somehow the same thing. I don't know. I'll leave it at that because I'm confused myself.
You've touched on one of the biggest topics there is in religion, right there. Everybody's got a point of view on that topic. Holy cow. Belinda, yeah.
Hi. This is off the really heavy duty topic we're really dealing with, but the story you told about the old man and his wife living in poverty, visited by some gods.
Yes.
And they were hospitable. They made the gods welcome and offered their goose that they wanted to keep, but they offered the goose to the gods and so forth. It reminded me of a story in the Old Testament about Abraham and his wife being visited by a couple of strangers who were actually angels. And they repaid Abraham Sarah's hospitality by predicting that Sarah would give birth to a child, which Sarah thought was hilarious because she didn't think it was possible. And but it did become possible. And it reminded me that many of the stories in the Old Testament emerged from stories that were current in Mesopotamia for many centuries. The flood story is the well-known one. And here's another one that has a parallel. So where do things come from? Where they go? And let trip as they travel. Stories travel. Thank you.
Well, that period of time was very intricate. All these religions knew each other intimately. There was a lot of carrying from one to the other. And of course, then modifications to suit that culture or whatever. But yeah. Any other
Mark,
comment? I see Janet is thinking about
I just
something.
wanted to add to that story. Odin, who is the Norse, the strong, became the higher above his two triplet brothers. He was triplet, but Odin became sort of the head of the Norse gods. And he apparently used to wander around dressed as a old man with a long beard and go into people's homes and ask for hospitality. And when he was given hospitality, he would apparently tell stories with lots of sort of moral threads embedded in them as a way of teaching people, good morals and good ways of being. So he also wandered around and banged on doors. And that was way up in, Viking territory, long way away from the other stories. So they do travel.
Well, I can't help thinking about morphic fields and whether that's what's operating. I mean, currently people would talk about memes, but I like the story behind the morphic fields better. Anybody else got thoughts or comments, or have I missed anybody who was waving at me?
Mark, I thought I'd just make a brief comment to Meryl's question.
Go ahead.
About the snake, and how it's been misinterpreted. As you pointed out, Mark, the snake is very close to the earth, right? But for Jung, the snake was I think you said this in one of your lectures, Mark, that for Jung, the snake was a symbol of renewal because it sheds its skin. And then we have the image of the Ouroboros, the snake biting its own tail, right?
Yep.
Which was for Jung a symbol of cyclic, well, really of eternity, of death and renewal. And in this, Meryl, it's a healing image because of the Greek god Asclepius. I can never say that properly. Asclepius. The staff of Asclepius, remember, and you see this in medicine today, has the snake wrapped around the staff. So it's because of the garden of, the Genesis story, the snake got a very bad rap, And I don't even know if Genesis, it says it was a snake. Yeah, does it say it was a snake?
Serpent, I think, probably.
A serpent, yeah, serpent. So,
Serpent's
yeah. So Jung had a very different way of looking at the snake, but he also saw it as a symbol of danger if you didn't get in touch with your unconscious, with the depths of the earth, for example.
That's what I was trying to get at, that I think that it probably, like many symbols, depending on how it's approached, it has its negative or positive side.
Right, right.
Belinda?
Another thing about snakes, ancient people were very, very aware of plants that had toxins and animals that had toxins. And of course, some snakes are venomous. Well, we know today from science that many toxins, both plant and animal, can be turned into healing the right way and in the right amount and applied at the right time. A very small amount of a toxin can provoke healing for something or other, but too much will kill. So you have to be very, very careful. Ancient people were aware of this. And they knew how often, well, for instance, the ancient people in North America knew how to turn the potato into an edible meal by removing the toxins, which are largely in the skin. Just as an example, I've said much. That's enough.
Very good. Yeah. So you're starting to see the why Jung is so interested in the opposites and how they coincide with each other, how they're wrapped up in each other. They're intertwined almost.
Yeah.
And so if you're going to have a realistic view of the entire universe or your whole psyche, you have to include both of them. You can't be cutting off one because you don't like it. What it is a demonstration of your ignorance of its beneficial properties in some circumstances, for instance. So why would God tolerate Satan? Really? Not just in the book of Job, but all the way through history. Why would he allow that to continue? This was his son, right? That's the way it's portrayed in the Bible. So why would he tolerate all this negative activity if there wasn't some divine purpose?
Would tolerate.
Why would God?
Right. And Mark, and the coincidence of opposites, right?
Yeah.
They meet in mystical theology, they meet at a deeper level. The opposites, called the coincidence of opposites. The opposites meet at a deeper level of reality.
That's right.
I don't fully understand that, but the opposition disappears at a deeper level of reality.
Well, I think it's not something you can understand. I think you have to experience it.
Right. I agree. Yeah.
And then you can accept it. But
coincidentia oppositorum. It came to us in the Latin phrase.
That's it. Well, folks, I think I've toyed with your minds long enough. Shall we call it a night?
There we are.
Shall we see each other next week? Hopefully there won't be any freezing rain to create a moment of worry in anybody's minds.
Mark,
so take care of yourselves.
Mark, did you say at the beginning?
Thanks, Linda. Good night.
Thank you.
Did you say at the beginning there were 5 more? Are there, is it
No,
session
no.
8? Did you go to 12? 4 more?
Yeah, 4 more
9,
after
10,
that.
11, 12? Okay.
I said
Any
5 when we
breaks?
started yes, there is a
Right.
break in April.
There's one break in there?
Yeah, 1 week.
Okay.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, see you all. Take care of yourselves.
Thank you. Bye.
Night.
Bonsoir.